So hello to our workshop from the Bibliographic Data Working Group from DARIAH. The workshop that we are having today is called Databases Information Systems for Research Output, Digital Humanities Outlook. Just a couple of organizational notes. The first one is that we are ending in 1:30. So it's a 90 minutes workshop. We'll have presentations. All of them will be approximately 10 minutes long. After each presentation, we can have 1 or 2 questions, short ones, and then if we have time after, when we end, we can have a discussion at the end. What I would encourage you to do is to use the chat and post the questions in the chat. Then if they are not answered right after the presentation, they can be answered after the presenter just in the chat. So I encourage you to do so. And I will now share also in the chat, just to remind you and make it easier for you, the program of today's event. So you can just click there and follow the program like that. And I would like to also share the first presentation also in the chat, and if someone else wants to, they can do it also. So thank you very much, especially for the presenters that they agreed to join us and present their thoughts and ideas about the digital humanities and research database outputs connection. And let's now proceed to the first presentation, which is an introductory one. And I will share the screen with the presentation. So, and just to maybe take a step back, I'm Tomasz Umerle. I'm the co-chair on the Bibliographical Data Working Group from DARIAH, and I work in IBL PAN in Poland. And what I would like to do is a couple of introductory remarks on the need to combine research and cultural data to understand complex phenomena, just to start off our meeting. So when we try to understand, and because this was one of the main tasks of our working group, we try to understand the bibliographical data landscape in the humanities. We found out, of course, that this is very complex, and there are different ways that there are different divisions in this landscape. But one of these divisions that was particularly interesting to us, and that is relevant even for the public stakeholders, is the division between GLAM and division between research infrastructures, which is particularly detrimental to the humanities. And when you look at more closely at this division between research infrastructures and GLAM infrastructures that deal with metadata, that deal with bibliographical metadata, we can see different services, different pieces of infrastructure on the one hand, on the other. So for the research output, we have current research information system, we have citation indexes, different kinds of repositories, metadata aggregators. And on the other hand, we have GLAM with its key pieces of infrastructure, like librarian catalogs, bibliographies, union catalogs, of course, archival and museum infrastructures, digital libraries. And what is characteristic for the humanities is that both types of research infrastructures are equally important for any kind of humanities research and advanced curation. And this is also perfectly exemplified in any research that deals with complex cultural phenomena, because complex cultural phenomena always call for heterogeneous data set. When we take the obvious example that we will be talking more about today, research impact, we cannot understand research impact of the humanities just by focusing on research infrastructures like citation indexes. We need to have an insight into bibliographies or librarian catalogs to understand things like deep citations, which will be talked more about today, or we need to look at different metadata aggregators to understand how researchers in the humanities impact not only other researchers in the humanities, but how they impact the society in general. For example, whether they are popular in the media, whether they are cited in newspapers and journals outside of the research realm. This is just one example, research impact, and the obvious ones, but we can go on and think of any number of research topics that we would like to discover. For example, historical writing, something that we've been talking about with our working group member Mikko Tolen a lot. So historical writing is something that has been with us for hundreds of years or thousands of years, and it has been done through different channels. Sometimes it's being done through the scientific channels, through scientific writing. Then we track it and try to understand it through citation index or academic repository. But sometimes it's being done also in non-research writing, like through biographies. And then we need library catalogs or bibliographies to understand this historical writing. And when we want to understand the whole complex phenomena, we need both types of data to understand it and to provide research and valuable information. So there are different initiatives right now that gain traction and that want to do more in this regard. They want to do more to understand research output, research publication in the humanities, and understand how they relate to cultural phenomena. One of them is Humanities Citation Index, which is the idea, a concept that has been advocated by Giovanni Colavita, Silvio Peroni, Matteo Romanello. You can click on the link at the top of the slide and read their paper, when they argue that we cannot think about Humanities Citation Index without references to cultural objects, without references to primary sources. And we need to consciously target those sources when we try to make our understanding of research output in the humanities richer. The other example of consciously trying to combine humanities research output with cultural information is a aggregator that's right now being worked on, which is GoTriple platform, that adds to an information from sources key for research output, key for research infrastructure. They add to it cultural infrastructure such as Europeana, to combine information that is critical for the humanities researchers. Of course, other initiatives exist and are being worked on that need to combine this information. The example is subject bibliographies. You cannot really think about a subject bibliography for literary research that only has information on journal or research output. You need information there that talks about literary works to combine those. This is the example of a research paper that is a review of a book, which is a literary work. So how can we further these works, and what we need to do to make this a systematic solution? So we need a discipline-sensitive semantic content analysis of research output in the humanities, which is a semantic markup that systematically identifies references to entities critical for a given humanities discipline. And this markup will be a little bit different when we want to talk about art history, literary research, and it applies both to metadata and full text. So when we look at art history, research publications, we have their names of the painters, we have their names of the paintings that they talk about, and our goal is to identify who they are referring to or what they are referring. The same goes for history, a little bit of a different references. Here we can see a history article, rękopis in Polish is manuscript, and then we have archival materials, as you can see, where they are citing archival materials, not only research papers. The other example is a semantic markup for literary research. When we use general NERS, name entity recognition systems, they are of course more and more successful, but they will be always lacking some sensitive information like literary works titles. So we can see the difference here between a typical NER markup and a NER markup that has been specifically developed for the needs of literary research. When you have richer markup, because we are developing name entity recognition for a specific discipline and we understand more what the humanities researchers are talking about. So what the digital humanities community needs to deliver from this point of view is, on the one hand, the harmonization of research output data models with cultural heritage data models. And it doesn't have to be one big solution, but a number of smaller pieces of infrastructure and tools that specifically target this need of making those research output in the humanities and cultural objects more interoperable, more connected. And the second thing that we need is we need to develop the semantic markup of research publications that goes beyond DOI-based citations and relate to primary sources. And they are already tools and they are already some solutions. But what we need to do is we need to focus them on the task of applying it to the main challenge of showing the connections between humanities research and cultural objects. And what we will get out of all this, why should we do it? The first thing is, only then we can really showcase the external value of the humanities and its impact. That's the first thing. The second thing, GLAM would be able to measure and better understand the reuse of the resources when they are identified in specific text. And finally, for research reasons, when we want to understand large phenomena and large processes, we need heterogeneous data sets to comprehensively analyze them. So the only way to scale up research based on bibliographic metadata is to harmonize data sets that are typically stored in different pieces of infrastructure. So this is all for me. Thank you very much for your attention. If there are some questions, we can have one or two right now, and then, or we could proceed further. Okay, if there are no questions right now, we'll have time after that. And if you want to ask questions, you can put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. And so please, when you follow the program, now we start the reuse part of our program. And please, Joonas, if you can take the floor.
Thank you, of course. Just a second, I'll share my presentation as well. Like so. Okay, everything's good. Happy to be here. Welcome. Hi all. My name is Joonas Nikkanen. I'm coming from CSC, so Finland, working with research information systems mainly. We developed, for example, the research.fi in our group, which I will be talking today. Briefly on the contents for my presentations are as follows. So I will be giving a brief overview on what research.fi really is, and then more on the subject of aggregating research information on a national level, which we really do, and then about the reuse of research outputs from our national service. But briefly on the service, what research.fi really is. So this is something that has been developed for some time now. But basically we are looking at the national research information hub. So a place or data warehouse of research information that integrates local institutional systems. Mainly has to do with CRIS-like data, so a national CRIS in that sense, but also includes further additions of data entities like research funding grants, projects, etc. We are owned by the ministry and financed by them, so this is a national endeavor in that sense as well. The most public part of what we do, the research.fi portal, was launched a few years back in 2020, but basically a lot of the work really goes under the hood, so to say. So really has to do with research information interoperability, data integrations and such. So the portal is there to just support and give the idea for a general public on what kind of research is done in Finland. The following table really tries to catch the idea what we do here. So really what we actually do is rather than have a single system which all of Finnish research organizations would use, we actually have a really decentralized landscape of various systems in-house built in some cases, for example, the funder systems, but also we use international CRIS systems in many of the universities and research institutes here in Finland, for example, pure installations for the CRIS-like data. But basically, the main task for our service is really to harvest and integrate information from different kinds of research entities to a single place. In the table, I try to show the idea that what kind of entities we have in place. Publications, for example, being the most traditional output there is, but then further along with other entities as well, coming to data sets, for example, research infrastructures and services, research news, etc. So all those kind of entities are currently included. And this is really an iterative process in the sense that also in the coming years, we are integrating information on both the researchers themselves, but also about their related activities. I will be coming back to this in the further slides. But really the idea about the research.fi is so that in the background, there is the idea that many of the local research actors are quite autonomous in how they actually store and use their research information related records, for example. So there are, as you all must know, quite a lot of different data models behind handling this information in local systems, institutional systems. The metadata, the quality about it is really differing. And the main driving force behind the research.fi is really on a national level to try to tackle many of these issues. So in the second bullet over there, by integrating various systems on a national level, we result, for example, in one cohesive access point for everything that relates to research made in affiliation to research in organizations in Finland. So this really has to do on the landscape on how and what kind of research is made in Finland. And this is really beneficial for international aggregators as well. We are coming to OpenAIRE, for example, in the next presentation, and this is really a crucial part in that sense as well. Also in regards of the subject of this workshop is really about the coverage being or trying to be more non-biased than, for example, in the citation indexes or other systems like Google Scholar. So in that sense, as we are getting the information directly from those organizations, it should be in that sense, for example, for local national language coverage, a better situation in that regard. Also, coming to the metadata quality or the structure of those, basically the data model behind how we actually share and do the data exchange on research information. There is a lot of work to do here, and that's what we have identified. Basically, the outcome of this work, which we do in collaboration with organizations and funders and other parts of the sector as well, is so that we try to most extent harmonize some of the structures there are, the differences which lie in those local systems. And also there is still real-time availability of the data. So in that sense that when we do the aggregations, many of them happen real-time from those local systems directly used by the research organization staff or the members or the researchers of that organization. In this slide, I try to just bring out some of the challenges, obviously included in working with national research metadata. This is not, well, this doesn't list all the issues there are or the challenges there are, but just some that you get the idea on when using information coming from national CRIS systems, like there are many in addition to research.fi. So there's CRISTIN, for example, in Norway and others as well. first is the coverage of different research outputs, really. But for example, for publications, especially due to the funding model in Finland, we could say that the coverage is really the best there is in the sense of including, for example, the SSH discipline because of the funding model. So this is really an incentive for the organizations to actually integrate this data on a national level because they get the funding from there. But then we come to other entities like research datasets, that there are not that many mature ways on handling that on an organizational level even. For example, getting to know and catching all the data sets that our affiliated researchers actually produce and having that system, I mean that information in our systems. So that's good to know that it really differs on the research entity that we are talking about here. Then the second bullet, the main bullet there is about the maintaining of the common data model and data exchange here. And this is really that affects the data quality in the sense that how and if it can really be used for metrics or for research in the sense, or even for comparison between organizations, or if we go further between countries in that matter. And this really has to do and it's really about working with the stakeholders in a national level to have everyone's ideas and maybe even the limitations on handling research information on local systems. Then, of course, there are the international standards. Probably, maybe in the next presentations, Andreas will be talking about the SAFE data model as well, which is behind mostly about the OpenAIRE. But this is really something to keep in mind as well. We are not only talking about national level here, but also about the international comparison and the international interoperability between CRIS-like information. And also, what is crucial in the sense of handling this kind of research information is the maturity of those research entities. So we are obviously looking to broaden the scope of what is included in research.fi. Currently, for example, upcoming entity are the research infrastructures and the services that are provided for the researchers, and getting an idea that what kind of data model would support on gathering that information and making it reusable. And that's crucial in the coming years to think about that, and also to broaden the scope of activities that what the researchers actually do beside publish and publish data sets. We are talking about well, panel participation, teaching materials, etc. So those kind of entities which are in some fields especially really important for the individual researchers, and then looking at solutions that how we can actually gather that kind of information on a national level and even make it so that it would be interoperable in many ways, at least on a national level. So some ideas for that. Coming to my last slide, I'm trying to keep it brief. This is really about the reusing of the research.fi information. First and foremost, there is the legislative changes in Finland in the sense that we actually, together with the ministry or cooperating with the ministry, got it through at the start of this year that there is now an act on the Finnish Research Information Hub. And what it really does is many things really, but the main points here being that this allows now the sharing of this public information on research outputs. In Finland, we quite literally took what the GDPR said about releasing this kind of information, that it was the ownership of those individual organizations, funders, for example. But due to the law change, the ministry now became the registrar of all this information, and it made it more simple to actually share this kind of information. I've been talking about this in international forums, and it hasn't been the case in all of the EU countries. So there's really quite a lot of play in how they look on the legislative side on this kind of information. But really coming to the main channel on how we actually provide this information, we are now really keen on building up the API collection for the research.fi. It's not fully ready, it's currently being piloted. We are looking at REST protocol first, and then followed by some protocols that could actually allow the bulk export of information that lies in research.fi. So for example, OAI PMH in that matter. So that will be something upcoming in next year, really, that we will have a working API collection to actually use all of the structured information we have. But then really, I don't know if it's a comment or question really, but while thinking about the use cases and the metrics side and then the analysis side of research information, we really come down to the question that while we are really working with real-time data flowing from integrations on local systems, how do we actually manage that on the level of analysis, for example, that just an example here being that, for example, the publications which are used as base of the funding model in Finland, we do this kind of data dump in the sense that for the statistical purposes, we actually freeze one part of the publications and say that this is the statistics part of the live data, but it can change over time as organizations do changes in their systems, etc. So this is really something that has to do in this, or one has to think about how to actually do metrics based on this kind of information. But thank you. This was briefly what I had to say here, and try to keep it short.
Thank you very much. Okay, are there any questions? Or yeah, there is a Peter, please.
Yeah, you mentioned quality assessment. So can you tell some sentence about that? You understand the problem and you see the problem, but have you did any action to solve the problems or measure the quality or improve the quality?
Yeah, good question. It is briefly to answer that question is so that basically what we do in research.fi, we just integrate the information. Even what in the act or the law change it describes is so that the organizations themselves do all the curation for the metadata. But by really how we actually try to control the metadata quality and the information that it's available there for those data entities is so that we try to harmonize the data models, and there are, for example, publications and for datasets, those mandatory pieces of information that needs to be filled in that common data model. So basically, from that point of view, we try to guarantee the information to be as par on the standard that we actually try to achieve on a national level. But obviously coming down to, for example, researchers' activities, the quality is there lacking, and that's what we try to import. But that really shows how kind of maturity levels there are for different research entities.
Thank you, Joonas. There is also a question for you in the chat, and please answer it just in the chat. And now we will proceed further. And now, please, Andreas, it's your turn.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here as well. And let me share my screen in a second. And hopefully all communications are going well.
Yeah, we can see it very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting OpenAIRE to present the OpenAIRE research graph in the context of research information systems in this working group. So my name is Andreas Czerniak from Bielefeld University Library in Germany, and I'm responsible for the CRIS guidelines of OpenAIRE since 2019. And currently I'm also co-sharing the group of people to updating the OpenAIRE CRIS guidelines. Today I will briefly present the OpenAIRE research graph, and in the context of research information systems is more a nutshell. So the outline is a more high-level overview about the OpenAIRE research graph and the common European research information model that also Joonas has mentioned in this presentation. And after this, we take a closer look to the aggregation of metadata handling in the OpenAIRE research environment and the propagation, and a short conclude. So let us start with the OpenAIRE research graph. The OpenAIRE research graph is an open metadata research graph of interlinking scientific outcomes with access rights information, linked information, and research communities, and also more. So you see here in the picture on the right side, the resource types for literature, publications, datasets, software, and this is in OpenAIRE called a research product. This is in the middle of the right. This research product is linked to personal identifiers like ORCIDs. It is linked to organizations, which are deduplicated also in OpenAIRE. This is linked to projects. The research products have the provenance information from which data source it comes from. And from the projects, you could see also the funding streams and the funders behind. This is a short overview about the graph, so it's content more. At the moment, we have more than 450 million harvested records, 500 million bilateral links, and more than 30 million full text, PDF full texts. In that case, the OpenAIRE research graph contains more than 160 million deduplicated research products. This means that we could see the same article, journal, data sets in different data sources, also from CRIS systems and other repositories, and OpenAIRE will deduplicate this. I will show it in a minute. We'll see also the links to the specific information to the research graph. A short overview about the Common European Research Information Model, which is mentioned. And this is a highly overview of these model with interlinking between different items and entities and so on. And I will focus, and OpenAIRE is focused at the moment to the middle ones. In the middle, you see the resource types of publications, patents, and products, but we also are interested in the projects, the persons that are exposing, is managed by CRIS systems, and also organization units, and furthermore, the funding, and we see upcoming interests of equipment and instruments that is using in the process of research output creation. Likewise, you see on the bottom left side, this is also covered in our guidelines at the moment, but it's not so good. It's more for further ones to handle conferences, events like this. But the Common European Research Information System model is more than this. You see also different other parts here that I'm not shown in detail anymore. For the aggregation and handling and propagation of data sources in OpenAIRE. OpenAIRE collects from different data sources from repository, literature, institutional thematic, national aggregators all over the world on a weekly basis. There are also OpenAIRE also including dumps from Microsoft Academic Graph, which is end of life at the moment, but we also take a look to OpenAlex here, but Unpayable is one's. Open Citations, I have seen Silvio here, is well known, but also Open ABC, and also from other formats, from the BioXemas, XEMA orgs, we collecting informations on weekly basis from registry, Re3 Data, Fair Sharing, Eurocris, Grid, ROR, and so on. So many data sources that OpenAIRE is aggregating here from all over the world. It's around about 10,000 more data sources that is used for creating the OpenAIRE research graph. This is a short overview about the repository type. I think you are all well known this. We have literature from institutional thematic repositories, journals, data sets, and so on. And additionally, from CRIS systems, we get information about what I say, the projects, fundings, organization units, and so on. This is all covered by the OpenAIRE research graph in the aggregation phase. On the left side, we have the data sources and aggregated on a weekly basis. And each data source have a compliant level with our guidelines, and we have a continuous validation on this metadata that we collect from the data sources and create an OpenAIRE research graph RAW. After this, we make some deduplications on the metadata for preprints, postprints, published versions, and so on. And keep it in mind, we have the provenance information of these metadata records. And this is also available in our portals. And also deduplicating the organizations. So like for Bielefeld University, it's called Bielefeld University or Universität Bielefeld in Germany. So after this, we enrich the graph, enrich the data with full text binding and some more informations, and make the OpenAIRE research graph from it. In this slide, I will show you the same things to create the OpenAIRE research graph. It is now one of the part of the European Open Science Cloud Core. There's called the Research Product Catalog, which contains all the metadata that I am showing before from the data sources that are compliant to the OpenAIRE guidelines and the upcoming interoperability guidelines for EOSC. And you see here on the right side the propagation to, on the one hand, the OpenAIRE dashboards like Explore, Monitor, Open Science Observatory, but also this will propagate to the funder platform from the European Commission, and also to some gateways that we have, like from DARIAH and other initiatives that we have here. In this case, I will conclude the presentation with one important parts, the CRIS elements that I have shown to you is very vulnerable for the visibility of the research. Our CRIS guidelines are open and community-driven approaches, so we have a GitHub repository that could that everyone could contribute to it. The OpenAIRE research graph itself has open APIs, and you find every 6 months roundabout the OpenAIRE research graph as a dump on Zenodo. We use persistent identifiers, vocabularies from core, of course, and we see that the metadata quality is an ongoing important aspect on every institutional, regional, national, or international repository, research information system, or aggregator. That's why we have these continuous validation in place. And I would like to invite you to come to our webinar on 5th of October. And in this webinar, we welcome the CRIS community to OpenAIRE. And this will be a joint webinar with our partner from EuroCRIS. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to ask questions.
Thank you, Andreas. That was one short question from Erzsébet. I would just read it, and then there are other questions in the chat, so please then proceed to answer them. But Erzsébet asked about whether it is in the plans to enrich or expand the OpenAIRE research graph with some cultural heritage data sources, or it is not planned.
So every data source could register at OpenAIRE. So and we are open to add more metadata from repositories, and the thing is that the repository should have in mind that it should have an interoperability with the metadata that is shared with us. So we have the OpenAIRE guidelines, especially for CRIS, but also for institutional and thematic repositories. And we also cooperate and rely on the data side schemas. And if the repositories are compliant with this, OpenAIRE could integrate the metadata from there.
Thank you very much. And now let's proceed to the second part, second larger topic of our workshop, which is the SSH evaluation related issues. And please, Erzsébet, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello everyone, and thanks for having me today. It's quite an honor. Let me just share some slides with you. just a bit of an excuse to start with. I think I'm the odd one out here who is not a bibliodata scientist. Apologies for that. I'm just a simple open science officer of DARIAH Europe. And in my presentation, I'm going to highlight mainly challenges, but to give a bit of suspense, at the end of my presentation, I will also relate back to Andreas' previous presentation to some extent. But let's start with something personal to tell you about how I encountered first, what was my first encounters about the bibliodata approaches to monitoring scholarly communication. It happened around, I think, 2017, 2018. That was the time when I started to become a professional in open access, open science advocacy. And the magic of these bibliodata approaches was obvious. And I remember how excited I got all the time. A new paper about the implementation of open access practices and the like came out. Until, I realized that arts and humanities data is missing again. So I think the problem is painfully familiar to you, and you already partially mentioned this in your presentation, the problem of citation, how much citation indexes became optimized for DOIs, and whether or not it's the best possible alignment with humanities publication practices. And then it was quite an enlightening study by Emanuel Kulczycki. If you're working with CRIS systems, national CRIS systems, if you're working with bibliodata, I think you might be well aware of this study and how compellingly it shows the, let's say, unsatisfactory coverage of arts and humanities scholarship in big citation databases such as Web of Science or Scopus. In their work, they check them against national CRIS systems, and the numbers that you can see on the right side are quite sad. So that's the elephant in the room, I would say. And what I would like to partially talk you about is a little bit further expand on this topic and tell you about some of the results of recent Horizon 2020 project we had a chance to participate in. It was called OPERA-SP, and we had the very precious chance to study social sciences and humanities publication practices in more detail and in the light of actual practice. And among other things, we wanted to get a deeper understanding of how this situation is coming about, how come this lower coverage of arts and humanities scholarship in big scientometric databases. And also we wanted to better understand the consequences, what it does, how it shapes, how it affects actual publication practices within the domain. And here I'm, while reporting the results, it's a nice place to shout out to Marta Blasnicka, who was my co-author of the report. So basically the research question for which, among other research questions, obviously, but one of the research questions for which we were looking for the answer could have been found about why mega journal or centralized approaches in scholarly communication like Nature or PLOS ONE in the hard sciences will never become a reality in the humanities. And so what we found is, first of all, that is what we call bibliodiversity is a big, it's a value in how arts and humanities scholarship works, how deeply it's embedded in very specific linguistic, geographical, disciplinary, smaller subdisciplinary contexts. But this is also a great challenge. There is what a data scientist would call a long tail of smaller journals, smaller publishers within the domain who do not necessarily operate with 100% along 100% digital publication workflows, we see quite an improvement in terms of persistent identifiers in the past years, but the coverage of PIDs within the domain of publications is still far from being 100% or near 100%. Yes, so we see many small contexts, and also one very particular challenge is the use of persistent identifiers for books and book chapters. More specifically, this is what we found is that this is not very established practice, and believe me, we saw also many disaster stories about what can go wrong with chapter level UIs. Another line of kinds of insight that we gained in the project is coming from the actual research practice. So we're trying to get a deeper understanding about these tensions between research realities, epistemic cultures, and research metrics, what it does with publication preferences. And in some cases, we found that despite the divergence, certain scholars are comfortable with grounding their publication practices within their own epistemic traditions, community practices, even though it doesn't match the unified bibliometrics approach, as you can see in the first excerpt, who says, what matters for me is the scholarly community I'm actually participating in. However, this runs a problem when you are applying for research funding, which is much more metric-centered. So it's problematic, to say the least. And I'm constantly worried about that. I'm not publishing in good enough or high quality enough journals, or not open access journals, or not enough whatever administrators think is actually the next big thing about scientific publishing. So I think it's a rather compelling statement on this divergence. And we came across examples where more senior scholars working in a research team rather made the compromise towards leaning towards research metrics to help career establishment of their early career colleagues, as you can see in the second excerpt. The younger or co-author, which is understandable to us, the more he needs or she needs a publication with an impact factor. Although we ourselves criticize the impact factor, we are fully aware that this is essential for career development. So basically, our conclusion is that it is this prestige economy that is summarized in this kind of visualization that defines the scope of what kind of content types make it to formal assessment and research evaluation. That said, as long as high prestige or high impact factor, I would say high prestige, because in arts and humanities, this is the more real issue. So the more prestigious the publisher is, the hardest currency, as it functions as the hardest currency when it comes to translating publications to research metrics. But since high prestige publication fora seem to be are usually dedicated to the established forms of scholarly communication, that is to the book, that is to the research paper, original research paper. There are lots of content types that, like data sets, like tools, like critical editions, like data visualizations, you name it, that remain out of the scope of scholarly communication. So this is bottleneck number one. Bottleneck number two, that you also may be aware of, is proprietary actors, proprietary players in scholarly publishing are gaining momentum when it comes to curating data that is used, that is feeding research metrics. So big, traditionally closed access legacy publishers, we see that they are super reactive to this tendency of dataification of research assessment. And since they are coming from an enormous competitive advantage in terms of scholarly information management systems and data availability, they can and they are easily expanding their portfolio to provide such metrics for universities. Usually these are black box services that is low in transparency. So this is a rather worrying threat if you are asking me, and a clear compelling case for keeping information management systems that are used for research metrics in as transparent as possible boxes. You can later you can check my colleague Samuel Moore's writing on this varying tendency. So the takeaways that I can bring to the table is community involvement is important, however obvious it may sound, but also the public ownership of this information management, the information management systems that are used to feed metrics is also crucially important. So just to finish my presentation, I want to show you one small contribution to this direction that we are currently working on at DARIAH Europe. And this has to do with OpenAIRE and the OpenAIRE research graph, actually. So thanks, Andreas, for preparing the floor to that. So as we learned from the previous presentation, the OpenAIRE research graph, I think, is probably the biggest publicly owned such scholarly discovery service in Europe. And it was important for us to expand the range of the research graph with domain-specific content from the arts and humanities and make content types that are important for arts and humanities scholarship, but are traditionally missing from metric services such as digital critical editions or image data or research software and these kinds of outputs visible in the research graph. And we were lucky enough that we had a project framework for that, which was called OpenAIRE Advance. And within the framework of OpenAIRE Advance, we set up a DARIAH OpenAIRE Community Gateway, so a DARIAH entry point to this research graph. And we integrated, we started the integration of DARIAH affiliated repositories to the research graph. You can see the French Social Sciences and Humanities repository Nakala. You can see the preprint repository Hull, and you can see the German textual sciences, mainly critical editions repository TextGrid. But we also added manually or like semi-manually other data sources and Senado communities that are important for us as well. And it turned out to be quite good in the sense of sustainability. That is, last year we signed a memorandum of understanding with OpenAIRE about to stabilize this collaboration, and that gave us enough confidence so that we could start supporting and encouraging other national DARIAH data services from Austria and from Germany primarily to join the build interoperability frameworks for the OpenAIRE research graph and integrate their data services through the DARIAH gateway so that this disciplinary hub can expand. Of course, in terms of metadata conversion, if you need to adapt to a shared common denominator of data site, there is always loss of information from subject-specific repositories, but this is how it is. And I think it's nonetheless a very, very important first step towards more diverse and more fair research evaluation, so that non-traditionally recognized content types becoming visible in global European discovery platforms like this. So I think that's it. I hope I didn't talk too long. And if you have questions, you know where to find me. And also, I think this is my presentation. This is the link to my presentation.
Thank you, Erzsébet. We have time for one quick question if you want, but if not, we can also proceed, and you can ask questions in the chat and Erzsébet will surely answer them. As we are almost perfect in terms of time, so we would proceed probably to the next presentation. Eline, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I will try to share my screen and start this presentation. Can you see this?
I don't. Can you share it once again?
Okay, sorry. Share.
Yeah. Yes, now I can see it very
now
well.
You can see it. Okay. And like this?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. My name is Eline Vandewalle. I'm from the University of Antwerp, where I am a PhD student, and my supervisors are Raf Guns and Tim Engels here on the slide. And today I will quickly present a case study of a live citation analysis that we have conducted for Flemish social science and humanities publications. But first of all, I will briefly explain what live citations are exactly, because you may not all be familiar with the concept. So basically, it's a metric from the bibliometrics community. It is also sometimes called library holding counts. And what we do is, for a book publication, we will count how many times that book is present in different libraries of a library catalog. So in our case, library catalogs that are our local catalogs. These are also the papers that introduced the concept, and the term live citation was coined by the second of these papers as a contraction between the word librarian and citation. The idea being that a librarian, when they acquire a book for the library, they offer a kind of citation of that book. So there is like a clear parallel trying to be drawn there between citations. So as I said, we did a Flemish case study on this using data first from VABB, which is a database from Flanders that contains all publications by social science and humanities scholars affiliated with the Flemish University. And this database is also used for the performance-based research funding system in Flanders. And the data is provided by the universities. We used this data to do searches in the library catalogs. First of all, a public library catalog from Flanders that contains all public libraries in Flanders, and then also a research-oriented library catalog from Belgium that does not only contain libraries that are university libraries, but also museum collections and government collections. So because of the nature of this data, we are focusing on social sciences and humanities, but also on publications in Dutch, because Dutch is the language spoken in Flanders. And also the reason why we are looking at public libraries is because we also are interested in this engagement of social science and humanities scholars with publications that are aimed at not primarily a scholarly audience, so also students, wider audience, lay people, etc. So what I will discuss today is first the coverage of books in these two library catalogs, also along the lines of local language and English publications and peer-reviewed publications. And then also I will be looking more specifically at those books that are widely available to the public, so that appear in very many different public libraries, and take a closer look at those. Another overview of the data, we have around 46,000 ISBNs from our database that we used for the searches in the library catalogs. For the public libraries, we had a coverage of about 18%, so not that high, you could say. And for the research libraries, we had around 55% coverage. Looking at the language distribution, the majority language for our total database of social science and humanities book publications is actually English. But if you look at the public libraries, of course, their Dutch is much more prominent. And looking at this another way, we can also see that if we break down the coverage a little bit more, we have in total a coverage in the public libraries of 18%. But for only Dutch publications, this is almost 50%, whereas for the English publications, less than 4%. So this also obviously in line with the mission of the public library to provide books that are of interest to the local audience, which is Dutch-speaking audience. Now, another thing we did is looked at the distinction between peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed. Obviously, it's not an easy distinction to make, and the proxy we used here is peer review defined in the VABB database, which is used for the performance-based research funding system. So basically, the publications that are listed as peer review do count towards the distribution of funds, and the ones that are listed as non-peer review do not count towards the distribution of funds. And we can also really see here that with the public libraries, most of the publications that end up there are not the type of publications that will count towards the funds, funding distribution between the universities. So as I said, I would also be looking a little bit more at some of the publications that do have this very wide availability in public libraries. There are two examples here. The first example is an example of a compilation work. And the second example here is a monograph by a psychiatrist who is offering more broad commentary on society. So basically what we did is we looked at the top 1% of highest scoring books in more detail and tried to devise a kind of a typology of those books along the lines of what type of contribution the social science or humanities scholar is offering here. And we first distinguish between the social science and humanities scholar as a supporting role as a scholar, where we can see that dictionaries and compilations are quite widely available in public libraries, but also literary works. And these are often really important works of literature to literary history, local literary history, that are then edited in a new edition by a social science or humanities scholar, in this case, humanities scholar, obviously, or provided with a preface by one of those academics. Then on the other hand, we have also works as authors, and this is sort of the realm of the general popularizations, which are very often history books, especially books of the First or the Second World War appear frequently among these. But then also we kind of put into a separate category books by a public intellectual. And the reason why we put these as separate is because these are kind of well-known names that also will appear in other media sources, not just as book authors, but they may also be invited to talk on the television or write opinion pieces in newspapers, etc. So they're kind of well-known people / academics. So we also looking a little bit more at the sort of personal characteristics of these people that are writing public library bestsellers. They tend to be well-known names that also appear in other media sources. They also hold more senior positions. And in our case, I mean, this could be different in different countries, of course, they're also usually male. There are also other studies that have looked at the public intellectual as a sort of category of academic. For example, in this study about the attention in the written press to academics, it was found that a small subset of academics actually get a lot of the media attention. And where they say frequent participation in the public debate is reserved for high status researchers only. And I guess this is also something that we kind of see a little bit in this public library bestsellers. So as some short conclusions, social sciences and humanities scholars do write books that are available in local public libraries and in local research-oriented libraries. Of course, a little bit less available in the local public libraries. But if we look at the Dutch language books only, the coverage is quite good there. And also the coverage is a little bit better for the non-peer-reviewed literature. What we can also see is that those books that are written by SSH scholars and that are widely available in public libraries do represent sort of varied activities by academics that could remain sort of under the radar in research evaluation and in their careers in general. For example, contributions to new editions of important works of literature, contributions to dictionaries or compilations, but also very important popularizations of knowledge from their field, especially for history, but also philosophy, art history, etc. So I will thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, please ask me.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a question from Sylvia. Please, Sylvia.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you so much. And I'm not familiar with live citations, but with citation studies. So I'm going to go from there. And if this is, something that is already solved in the live citations world, do say so. So I was wondering, in the citations world, there's like this idea that even if people cite something, that doesn't really mean that they read it, right? But at least there's like, you can guess they read it because they are quoting something. Now, in library holdings, not because there's something that it's there, it means that it's being read. So are you looking also into this?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We did try to get the hold of the loan data, because that would actually be more useful as a metric for the actual usage of books. In this case, we can only say whether or not books are available, and we can only really use it as a proxy for availability. What we do know is that books that aren't read get taken out of the library collections. I just know this from talking to people from the collection, but we didn't get access to the data of the loan data. There was some problems there. But it would really be nice to be able to do this, and maybe in a different country with a different library catalog, it might be possible to get access to that. So,
thank you so much.
Thank you. And one note, maybe because we are also very much interested in this loan data at some point. And so we also were asking around, because there are GDPR issues around it. But we also have a very good response from the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, for example, about some accessibility. We didn't get to it, but we had good response that it could be possible. So it would be very interesting to get our hand on those loan data. And thank you very much. And now we proceed to our last speaker, Marek Kozłowski, please.
Hello, I share the presentation now. Is it full screen? Yes?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, I am rather new in this SSH research area. Mostly I spend time within the computer science environment, but mostly connected with the NLP and computer vision. I think that I defended my PhD in 2014 and was also about the machine learning and NLP. And since 2013, I am the head of Natural Language Processing Laboratory in National Information Processing Institute in Warsaw. And during this presentation, I will show you something about our data, our knowledge, our skills. As I mentioned, most of my time I spent in the natural language processing environment. And I show on this timeline how this NLP area evolved. It has been evolving. And you can see that there were some peaks in the timelines that before 2014 was the statistical approaches. After 2013 was the neural networks revolution and some very crucial models I show you. But what is the most important for me, that these NLP models can be very easily used now in also in your area, in your SSH area. especially when you have lots of texts or scans. Now, the currently used NLP models are very powerful. And what about the OPI? OPI, National Information Processing Institute, is in the acronym in Polish is OPI, OPI. And we have lots of dedicated in-house repositories. I think we have one of the biggest repositories about the Polish education and research. We have the Polish thesis database counting a few millions theses. We have the Uniform Anti-Plagiary Systems databases. We have the Polish Scientific Bibliography databases, Poland databases that have data about students, researchers, their promotion paths, and many others. But what is more important, that lots of data I mentioned before, they have some legal issues. That they mostly the owner of this data is the Ministry of Higher Education, and only some of them can be used on an open or can be shared with other actors, stakeholders. And very crucial in NLP is to having the very huge raw text corpora. And very often we build this raw text corpora using some of the data we have in-house, but also taking into account the publicly available data like the Polish Parliamentary Corpus, Wikipedia, SCOP, books, articles, and Common Crawl archives. And now I will show you one of our database. I think very interesting for you. It's about the Polish Scientific Bibliography. It's a portal that aggregates information about the publications of Polish scientists themselves, and the Polish scientific institution achievements. It includes the publications in the Polish and foreign journals, publishers, conferences, authors, scientific institutions, and all of those data are gathered, collected since 2014 or 2012. And we have, during last 10 years, we have almost 3 million publications, about 100,000 journals, 100,000 conferences, and almost 6 million authors, because they are Polish authors, but also they co-authors. So if there is any publication that we have the one author from Poland and other co-authors from other countries, we also this information we collect in our databases. And I show also how this 2.6 million publications distributed around different types, articles, books, chapters, and others. And all of those data are mostly metadata, but they are very clean metadata, because we have also, we use some harvesting, but also the lots of information is inputted and corrected by, they're called the editors, but the university editors. We have the such kind of, they have the university importers, university editors, because we collect data semi-automatically. It means we collect data, but they also clean the data after all. And the data finally are used during our evaluation process. And why, therefore, these data are very clean, because they are cleaned before each evaluation period. And something about neural language models. As I mentioned before, the prior deep learning epoch, the models were rarely generic, and they were not so easily customized. Currently, we have the multi-language models. We can very easily customize them, tailor them. Fine-tuning is called this customization of generic models. And since 2017, the transformer revolution has accelerated. And in OPI, in our institute, between 2020 and 2022, we created a huge bunch of neural language models. They are dedicated for the Polish language, and they are state of the art. I will show you how we created our version of the BERT models. The Polish Roberta is the Polish robustly optimized BERT models. BERT is the state-of-the-art language model, and it was published 2018. And we used some optimized versions from 2019 and create the Polish version of these models. I show only some of these models below, and I can say also the one information that the Roberta version 2 Lerch is currently the best Polish language model. Yeah, it's better than the Allegro ones or other universities models. It was published in March 2022, and some revisions were in May 2022. And this Roberta V2 Lerch is the best language model for Polish language currently. And what kind of systems we built in OPI? I mentioned only those systems that are applying NLP components. We have the uniform anti-plagiarism system. Is the biggest uniform anti-plagiarism system in Poland. Only one, free of charge, standardized, and also defined by the ministry as the obligatory for universities. We also build the systems for the office. UOKiK is the Office of Consumer and Concurrency Protection. Is the Polish version of the Office of Consumer Protection, and we won the competition, AI competition, nationwide AI competition, and now we are the provider for NLP systems, NLP empowered systems for the Office of Concurrency and Competition Protection. And in these systems, we mostly work on the enormous number of agreements, the written agreements. Mostly there are scans. There are scans. Then 80% of the data that are processed in this system, there are scans of agreements, and we work with these scans of agreements. We extract the text from them, and next we detect the abusive clauses. It means that the goal of the system, the objective of the system, is to having given the agreement in any kind of form. It can be the machine readable, it can be scanned. The goal is to detect the potential violation. It means to identify the abusive clauses in the agreement. We also, in 2022, we were granted the funding for building the huge system for also the Office of the Consumer Protection. It's focused on the dual quality. There are some cases where, for example, the same product sold in the German market and the Polish market, they have diverse quality issues. For example, and we are using the NLP models and machine learning. We created a list of products that have diverse distribution of opinions between different markets. For example, we identified that some product has the multiple negative opinions about one aspect of this product in Poland, and there are none such kind of opinions in Germany or Austria, on Switzerland. And we identified such a products, and the Office of Consumer Protection next validate these products in the laboratory environments. And also this is mostly based on the machine learning, sentiment analysis, and aggregated from the micro opinions to the macro level, and making some statistical tests between the different distributions. All our models are published on a GitHub, and we have our institute site where there are the models that are published, and there are also some different information how you can download it and use it in your systems. Of course, all of these machine learning models are free, because it's much easier to distribute the models than the data. Okay, it was very brief introduction of myself and also the institute, but I remember that only 10 minutes is for any presentation, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. We have time for one question to Marek. Is there something? If not, I have one question, Marek, to you. So do you see a possibility, or you would like to see a possibility of kind of combining what you do for the scientific publication tracking and NLP development? Are you thinking about this?
Yes, we are open for any type of contribution. And as I mentioned, we have the huge many years of experience in this bibliographic area, and because of the published scientific bibliography database that we are hosting it for more than 10 years. And also we have a huge experience in NLP models, machine learning models, and I know that now currently in 2022 appeared the very powerful models that can improve the semantic marking the publications. Because what you are talking about earlier about that you make some name entity recognition, some references. I call it semantic marking, like the semantic markups. But you create some semantic tagging your publications to get in order to get some information from them. And I think the currently published data models, the deep learning models, they are the best ones. I think that they are the gain of quality that they provide is a huge in compared to the models that were popular 2-3 years ago.
Thank you, Marek. So we are right now at 1:30, so I think that we will be ending. We don't want to keep you more. So just organizationally, we'll have all the presentations published. Of course, the recording also will be published to everyone. We will send you the link. And please allow us for one quick information about our working group's next meeting that is quite soon. And Wojtek Malinek, my co-chair, will just talk about to you for 2 minutes and provide you the information. Wojtek?
Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to talk for 2 seconds, but basically I have sent the invitation to our next event, which is Mutual Learning Workshop for Improving Cultural Heritage Bibliographical Data. We are very sorry for this long title, but we have discussed the title for a long time and we haven't been able to make it shorter. But basically this event should bring on one place the specialists from the librarian sphere and bibliodata researchers. And the idea behind is just to offer the floor to mutual discussions of the topics which are common for both of these for both of these spheres. So yeah, Tomek is just showing you the program, which you can also find on the link which is now at the moment available on the chat. If you would like to come in person, it's definitely possible to come to Prague. If you would like to join us via Zoom, it's the second and maybe more comfortable option for you. So please, if you would like to register, if you would like to join us, feel free to make so. Thank you.
Thank you, Wojtek. And thank you all for coming. Thank the presenters for presenting. Thanks for all the questions and the answers. And see you at another occasion. Thank you very much. Have a nice day and a nice weekend.